What's up, everybody? We have some new stuff to talk about today. All of you have been sending me Kevin Franke's lawsuit against Jodi Hildebrandt. Now, we knew the kids were going to sue Jodi Hildebrandt, and we knew Kevin Franke might be involved as their guardian and sue on their behalf, but that's not what's happening here. I saw the heading. It is just Kevin Franke suing Jodi Hildebrandt. We're going to read this lawsuit together today. We're going to figure out what claims and causes of action he has. I haven't even read the lawsuit. We're going to watch it, or we're going to read it together. And civil lawsuits are my jam. So this is what I do. And that's what we're going to dive into today. Say, what are the facts? What are the claims? What's he asking for money-wise? And do we think Jodi Hildebrandt is going to have to pay Kevin Franke at the end of the day with this lawsuit? I can't wait to read it and hear what you guys think about it as well. All right, so it is a 9-page lawsuit, which is not unusual for a civil case like this. But as you can see, here is the heading. Kevin Franke, not on behalf of any children, which he can't at this point. He can't make legal decisions for them at this point. Eventually, if he becomes their guardian, though, we know the answer to will they sue Jodi Hildebrandt? It's absolutely yes. If he's suing her right now, absolutely would he sue on behalf of his children. Now, I think some are already adults. I don't know if Jodi Hildebrandt had any connection with them. If they did, it would be an easy slam dunk case. I mean, that's going to be per se abuse, per se battery, per se intentional infliction of emotional distress against all of the children, with tons of damages in the past and to be suffered in the future. I mean, unlimited amount of civil dollars that Jodi Hildebrandt is going to have to give to these kids that they are going to win in civil court. That's my guess. But what's interesting is, if it's a limited amount of money, let's say she just has her, I don't remember, $5 million house that she's selling. How much of it is Kevin Franke going to cut into? Because in my opinion, the kid's collective case is worth more than $5 million. So Kevin Franke's going to come in and potentially take a chunk. I don't know how I feel about that. Let me know how you guys feel about that. If he deserves it, I guess I get it, but I don't know. All right, Kevin Franke buying through counsel of record Randy Kester of Young, Kester, and Black and Jube. Cause of action. Okay. Plaintiff, a resident of Utah County, state of Utah, and was so during the time in which the defendant's tortious conduct occurred, as hereinafter alleged and set forth. Defendant, Jodi Hildebrandt, is currently a resident of the state of Utah and was so during the time of her tortious conduct alleged herein. She currently resides where? Yep, in the Utah State Prison, and will for a long time. I added that last part. Defendant's tortious conduct occurred in Washington County, state of Utah. By the way, tortious conduct just means bad conduct. Torts are what you sue for in civil cases. Unintentional torts are negligence or accidental acts. Intentional torts are battery, assault, when you intend to do something and it wasn't an accident, right? You can sue for either intentional torts or unintentional torts. Either way, they are considered tortious conduct. And the wrongdoer, the at-fault party, the bad guy or gal, is the tortfeasor. So you hear those kind of legally terms. It just means their bad conduct and that person that committed the tort. The court has jurisdiction over the parties and subject matter of this action. The proper venue is in this court. Plaintiff, Kevin Franke, is the father of 4 minor children. Okay, and here are the 4 minor children's initials, which is how you write it in lawsuits to not put their name out there in the public record. While plaintiff was residing in Utah County beginning on or about May 22nd, 2023, defendant, in collaboration with plaintiff's then wife, Ruby Franke, also mother of these children, moved the 4 minor children to defendant's home in Ivins, Utah. Okay, so we see our first connection there with Ruby Franke. Neither defendant nor Ruby Franke advised plaintiff of their removal of the children from the family home in Springville, Utah, to defendant's home in Ivins, Utah. So we're finding out some facts we thought we knew, but maybe didn't know the specifics. We knew Kevin wasn't involved, but now we know he did not know that they were removed and moved into Jodi Hildebrandt's home. For the period of May 22nd through August 30th of 2023, what is that? May to June, June to July, July to August, 3 months, while at the defendant's home, defendant did intentionally and or recklessly and or negligently. Okay, so he's adding in there, it was either intentional, reckless, or negligent. Either she meant to do it or knew or should have known she shouldn't have done it and still did it. She wrongfully detained plaintiff's 2 minor children, often confining them to a room in the home and or absent of the and or basement of the home, from which they were not allowed to leave without the permission of the defendant or Ruby Franke. Further, these children were strictly prohibited from leaving the premises of the Ivins home under threat of further or increased punishment described herein after or going to jail. A couple things here that I want to focus on just with this first paragraph that I assume is going to affect and apply to the rest of the case. Number one, how does Ruby Franke play into all this? Well, Kevin Franke could potentially sue her as well, but he hasn't. If she has extramarital funds or anything like that, or funds that she's made post-marriage, can't sue her for your own money or your own homeowner's insurance or things like that you're an excluded party on. But you can sue your wife if she does certain things to you if she has money. He didn't do that here. Okay? But guess who can force her to be part of this lawsuit? And many times there are parties that are considered indispensable, meaning we can't have this case without this defendant in there. Sometimes it happens in cases where if we sue a company because something that happened in their store injured our client, something fell from the ceiling. Well, the company could say, or the business could say, well, that's actually a product liability case of that air conditioner, the person that makes those air conditioners. So they're an indispensable party. We need to bring them in. It's not just us who are at fault for you coming into our store to buy something and the air conditioner fell on you. It's also their fault because they created a faulty air conditioner. So that person's got to be here. So Jodi Hildebrandt could add Ruby Franke as a defendant and an indispensable party to this case potentially. So just because she's not in the initial complaint doesn't mean she won't be in there later. But more importantly, and I think a lot of question you guys might have, because so far we've only heard wrongdoing and horrible, despicable things done to the kids, not specifically to Kevin Franke in this lawsuit and otherwise in the world, in the criminal case, in their sentencing hearings, things like that. And I do think that what happens to his kids could absolutely have an effect on Kevin Franke. There's no doubt about it. But in order to have an effect, Kevin Franke has to know about it. So far, from the time period of May 22nd to August 30th, as proven by paragraph 7 here, he was never advised. He didn't know his kids were going through this. He didn't even know about the abuse or the alleged bad action. So how could it have affected him negatively? During that time period, I would argue it didn't. It had no effect on him whether they were abusing his kids or not, because he chose to accept the invitation to leave their life and their family. So I think it's going to be very difficult to prove any bad action or damages caused during that time period. And I don't mean to sound insensitive. I think they were all caught up in some horrible things and being brainwashed and stuff, but they were talking about, I was invited to leave and I did leave. So if you're not there by your choice, it's going to be hard to prove that you were damaged during that period of time. You didn't know the wrongdoing was happening. All right. Inflicted and allowed another adult to inflict serious physical injuries upon the 2 children in her residence. So who was that other adult? Is that Ruby Franke or is it somebody else? The defendant committed physical torture of RF, who was forced to do physical tasks for hours and days at a time. These included wall sits, carrying boxes full of books up and down stairs, and working outside. RF was forced to do outside labor with shoes in the summer in the heat. He was forced to stand in direct sunlight for several days. He was forced to remain outside at all hours of the day and night for extended periods of time. These actions resulted in repeated and serious sunburns with blisters and sloughing skin. Okay, once again, this is horrible for RF. And in my opinion, there's not enough money in the world to give these kids as far as damages for what happened to them. But how does this affect Kevin Franke? Why is this his damages? I can think of some reasons, but I want to see what they went with. Additionally, if these facts sound familiar, it's because they're probably taken right out of the plea agreements. RF was denied adequate water for several days, and he was required to remain in the summer heat, and he was punished when he secretly consumed water. He was denied sufficient food, and when given food, he was given very plain meals, rice and chicken, while others in the house ate regular and more flavorful meals. By the way, All of these facts have already been agreed to by Jodi Hildebrandt. So when she responds to this, if she denies any of them, they can get additional damages for proving them with the plea agreement where she agreed to the factual basis. But that's why you got to make sure you take them exactly the same, because if you change one word or one little thing, then she has the right to deny them. RF was isolated from other people and denied all forms of entertainment, including books, notebooks, and electronics. In July, RF attempted to run away from the compound when he was caught by the defendant and Ruby. He was taken to the home and his hands and feet were thereafter regularly bound, including being tied to multiple weights. Many times the bindings included 2 sets of handcuffs, one on his wrists and one on his ankles. At times, while RF was lying on his stomach, ropes were used to tie 2 sets of handcuffs together so that his arms and lower legs were lifted off the ground in hogtied fashion. These bindings resulted in injuries to his wrists and ankles where the handcuffs cut through the skin and damaged muscle and tissue. I don't remember it specifically being agreed to those certain facts, but they may have been in there as well. And they can take some facts directly from the court documents and add other facts that they know from talking to them later, to the kids later, or even to Ruby. Ruby could help give them facts for this lawsuit. The injuries were treated with homeopathic remedies, cayenne and honey, and covered with duct tape. Then the bindings were placed on top of the duct tape. These actions caused severe emotional harm to RF due to the fact that they began in May and escalated through the summer months. Additionally, the defendant and another adult regularly sought to indoctrinate RF and convince him that he was evil and possessed. He needed to willingly be obedient and avoid punishment. The punishments were necessary to force him to repent. RF was told everything that was being done to him were acts of love. So emotional abuse, obviously. Psychological abuse, obviously. And again, no argument that I would not throw the book at them in civil court, damages wise, as I'm sure all of you would if you were on the jury. Because again, this stuff has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, theoretically. So when the burden is lower and it's raised judicata that she's already admitted she's done this, all they would really have to prove in civil court is damages. What are the damages amounts? Because proving liability, proving the facts, proving what she did to these kids is going to be easy. It's guaranteed. They might as well admit it. And they may admit it, or the court may force them to admit it to say it's something that's already been litigated and agreed to. That's what res judicata means, basically. So the only thing they'd really argue about in civil court is how many millions of dollars these kids are entitled to and how much can Jodi actually pay. But where does Kevin Franke come in? Both children were present in the home and saw these actions being taken against each other by the defendant and Ruby Franke. I agree, the children saw it, but Kevin Franke didn't see it. He was not in the impact zone, as we say in Florida. In these and other ways, the defendant caused severe emotional harm to RF and EF. Other than the binding in specific instances abuse RF was subjected to, EF was subjected to the same treatment as RF. She was isolated and forced to do extreme and demanding physical tasks, remain outside, and denied adequate food and water. EF was told that these punishments were necessary for her to be obedient and to force her to repent, and were being done to her in order to help her. She was indoctrinated with the idea that defendant's extreme abuse behaviors towards her were acts of love. EF was also reportedly told she was evil and possessed. These statements to her by the defendant and Ruby Franke convinced EF that she was evil and needed to go through these things in order to repent. I mean, honestly, I would argue that the comments like this coming from Ruby Franke were worse than Jodi, because when your mom tells you something, I mean, you just kind of believe it. Really sad. EF was further forced to work outside in the heat, barefoot. She was forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for an extended period of time, repeatedly injuring her and sunburning her feet. When examined by medical professionals on August 30th, these wounds were apparent by scabs, blisters, and sloughing off of skin. By the way, I think the kids will absolutely sue Ruby as well. EF was physically forced or coerced to jump into a cactus multiple times. So we're at 5 pages in, and I haven't heard anything about how any of this affects Kevin or any facts that were damaging to Kevin. Obviously, finding out about this after the fact is probably what he's going to go with, but I haven't seen anything yet about that. On or about August 30th, 2023, RF was eventually able to escape from the defendant's home and contacted a neighbor. RF requested from the neighbor food, water, and that law enforcement be called, so he could be taken to jail. This latter request was because he had been so indoctrinated by defendant that if he escaped, he would go to jail. Instead of jail, however, of course, he was cared for by first responders and eventually admitted to the hospital for severe malnourishment, his body being emaciated, and for treatment of his many and serious wounds and injuries. On the same day, defendant was arrested at her home. By the way, Legally, it may sound like I'm being hard on Kevin Franke. Let's not go crazy on him in the comments and say he's a horrible person for trying to get money out of this and things like that. I do think there are legitimate civil claims he could have. We will see what he claims down there. He's going through a horrible time. I get it. Maybe he and his lawyer think this will help in the process, start the ball rolling for when the kids can file their lawsuits. Let's hope for the best always and see the best in people and try to give grace. I don't want to destroy this guy. He's been through a lot, and he's still going through a lot trying to get his kids back. On the same day, defendant was arrested at her home. After searching defendant's home, EF was eventually located in a closet of the home, sitting on the floor. First responders and law enforcement found her in an emaciated, food-deprived condition, and although conscious, was so emotionally traumatized and afraid that she would not communicate with them. Only after hours of reassuring her of her safety, calming her fears and offering her food, she ate an entire pizza and part of another. Were they able to coax her out of the closet so she could be taken to the hospital to treat her injuries, malnourishment, and emotional state? As a result of the foregoing, the state of Utah, through the Department of Child and Family Services, took custody of all 4 of plaintiff's children in order to address professionally the emotional and psychological condition of the children, which had been so seriously and adversely manipulated and indoctrinated. The children are residing in separate homes while in state's custody. All right, so here's the first thing that we can start to see a connection maybe of some lawsuits. Jodi Hildebrandt directly caused the state to take Kevin Franke's kids from him. Now, there are going to be legal arguments that he gave up that right and he wasn't around the kids anyway. So having them out of his custody, is that really something Jodi Hildebrandt caused, or is that something Kevin Franke agreed to? The children's personalities, emotions, and psyches were so damaged and altered that it was beyond the father's capability to restore them without professional intervention of state's resources through juvenile court. Interesting. This through a rehabilitation and restorative process directed and prescribed by professionals treating the children. In order to restore his children to his care in their family home, father himself has complied with the court process and has affirmatively sought his own regimen of professional therapy. I think that's a good idea. In order to coordinate not only with the children's treatment providers, but to gain an understanding of his children's conditions and needs and how to best facilitate the restoration of all of his children back to their former status as happy and healthy individuals and of a happy and intact family in their home. Okay, so now we're starting to get into what he's been subjected to, and he is now finding out about everything they went through and what Jodi did to them and how that's affecting him. The intentional and or negligent acts of the defendant have completely damaged and altered for the worse Kevin's marriage, all of his children's individual psyches, personalities, and behaviors, essentially dismantling, exploding his family and his personal life. The consequences of defendant's intentional and or negligent acts were foreseeable as to the effect on these children and to the effect on their father. The plaintiff herein, based thereon, Kevin for causes of action alleges as follows. First, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Okay, could have guessed this. Plaintiff hereby incorporates, as though fully set forth herein, all the other paragraphs above, meaning all the facts above. Defendant engaged in severe and intolerable conduct as set forth in this complaint. Defendant acted with reckless disregard of the probability of causing emotional distress to Kevin and to each of Kevin's children. Kevin suffered severe and or extreme emotional distress that was caused by defendant's conduct. As a direct and proximate cause of defendant's wrongful action and omission, Kevin has suffered past and future economic, non-economic pain and damages, pain and suffering, emotional stress, loss of quality of life, loss of enjoyment of life. Okay, so pretty vague, which is okay. You don't have to specifically get into it when you specifically allege the facts above, but when the damage was done to somebody else and you're explaining how it's affected you, I would dive into that. I would say, hearing that this happened to his son or his daughter, Kevin felt this, and it's changed Kevin's life like this. Hearing that it's made it more difficult for Kevin to build relationships with his kids. Hearing that he may never get his kids back. I would have also said Jodi is the one that basically brainwashed Ruby and forced her to kick me out of her house. Jodi is the one that brainwashed me in these group things and forced me to leave my kids to allow all this to happen. Part of the reason all of this happened is because Jodi forced me out. Jodi's brainwashing forced me to think it was an invitation and that I was invited to leave. And because she forced me out of my family, all of this happened. If I would have been there, I could have prevented this, but her forcing me out allowed all this. And now I have to deal with that guilt forever. That's what I thought we were going to hear. That's intentional infliction of emotional distress. Kicking a father out of his family's house. She, as a therapist, should know better. that the fully intact family is better for the kids. And the father should be the protector in this situation. That's what I would have said, because that directly affects Kevin. It's direct action by Jodi. And now he's dealing with guilt. And again, economic damages of having to go to therapy, economic damages of potentially not being able to work. Maybe it's even the reason they stopped doing their YouTube channel, because Jodi came and twisted it and morphed it into that. Maybe he could try to blame her on their lack of YouTube funds. Those are better civil causes of action, in my opinion, than the way this was written, where it's all focused on the kids' damages. And he's saying, yeah, I need to get a piece of that too, basically, because it makes me sad too, which maybe he would be entitled to some of it. But I think the latter, kind of what I just explained, would be a better set of facts that he should go with in trying to sue Jodi Hildebrandt. And I think that's legit. And I think that he could absolutely prove that. Second, negligent infliction of emotional distress. She engaged in conduct she should have realized would be unreasonable risk of causing emotional distress to the children, Kevin and others. So again, causing emotional distress to the children, if I was the judge, I would probably make them clean this up and say, you can't claim damages to the children. You can't morph this and mix this. The children will have their day in court. Their guardian, whether it's Kevin or somebody else, should and could sue Jodi Hildebrandt, and that's when they will talk about their emotional distress. This has to focus on Kevin's damages. Defendant knew or should have known the conduct could cause the sort of emotional distress that might result in illness or bodily harm or injury. To who? Obviously to the kids, but to Kevin? Defendant's conduct unintentionally caused Kevin to sustain severe emotional distress characterized by illness or bodily harm or injury. Okay, this one actually at least says Kevin. As a direct and proximate result of defendant's wrongful acts and omissions, Kevin has suffered past and future non-economic damages, pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of quality of life, and loss of enjoyment of life. So again, you're allowed to plead these alternatively. Either she did it on purpose or did it on accident. Third is just plain negligence. Defendant undertook duties and responsibilities with regard to Kevin and the minor children and engaged in conduct, all of which imposed upon her a legal duty to act reasonably and within the scope of acceptable behavior in her interactions with Kevin and the children. So unless I missed it, did he put in there about, everything we heard in his interview about the small groups and her, training him or working with him as a therapist and manipulating him and forcing him out of the house? Those would be duties and responsibilities that she undertook with Kevin. Defendant, as detailed in the statement of facts, breached her duty of care. Defendant breaches of duty, negligence, caused Kevin economic and non-economic damages as may be established upon proof at trial to include pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of quality of life, and enjoyment of life. Kevin is entitled to interest on all economic damages and may be established in accordance with the statute providing the same. Very interesting. This matter falls under Tier 3 and is permitted discovery pursuant to Tier 3. I don't know what that is. That's a Utah-specific thing. It's probably just like the scheduling of discovery. Jury demand. They demand a jury on all issues. Prayer for relief. So let's hear, what is he asking for damages-wise? By the way, because she's a therapist and undertook this stuff, duty, breach, causation, damages is a good cause of action for what the facts I was talking about. So I think negligence and I think he has the three right causes of action for what Jodi Hildebrandt did to him. I think he needs to get more specific on what she did to him in therapy and forcing him out of his own house and causing him guilt and emotional distress, and additionally what has happened to his kids and how that's affected him. Wherefore, plaintiff prays for judgment against the defendant as follows: for past, present, and future special damages, which is like money, economic damages, if he's had to pay for therapy, if he's lost money from work or lost money from the YouTube channel, that type of stuff, special damages. I know people are going to say the YouTube channel fell because of stuff they did with their son in the beanbag and all of that. Fine. Could they have re-upped it or at least made a part of what they used to make? And Jodi Hildebrandt squashed that? I don't know, but I'm just saying that could be a potential economic damage. For past, present, and future pain and suffering, anxiety, fear, guilt, for all past, present, future losses and harms and all their general damages are justified under this claim. And then here's an interesting one: for exemplary punitive damages as might be determined at trial. So punish Jodi. Make sure no other therapists or anybody uses religion or anything like that in the future. And you can get this hook usually in most jurisdictions, not off negligence, not off negligent infliction of emotional distress, because we usually don't want to go that far unless it's reckless or intentional behavior. But sometimes you can get there with negligence if it becomes reckless or willful and wanton disregard for human life or utter disregard for human life and safety. Then you can get it there. But The hook for punitive damages, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Intentional torts, many times you can get punitive damages for, like we saw in Maya with battery and things like that. For prejudgment, post-judgment interest, costs, attorney's fees, and any such all further relief as the court deems just and equitable. Dated April 11th. So very interesting. Very interesting. Hand delivery to Jodi Hildebrandt. She's easy to find now and easy to serve now that she's in prison. So that is the complaint. And I think you hear my feelings on it and thoughts on it. I think he absolutely has a good argument for negligent and intentional infliction of emotional stress and negligence for what she did to him. I'm not so sure this is the best set of facts. I know it's a very shocking set of facts. It's a set of facts that's going to make any jury hate Jodi Hildebrandt. It's a set of facts that would absolutely come in at trial. But I think specifically for Kevin Franke's cause of action, it needs to be more directed and specific towards her actions towards him and his damages. Because like I said, the kids absolutely should, and I hope will, have their day in court and get every dollar to Jodi's name. Every dollar. I hope none of it's protected. And I know money's not going to fix everything, but it will help. It will help them in a million different avenues because it's going to be hard for them to get back into normal society, maybe even get normal jobs in the future. Hopefully not, but they're going to have a harder time than your average 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But let me know what you guys think as respectfully as possible. And if you think this is horrible and he shouldn't do it and it's going to hurt the kids and all that, that's fine. Let's find our most gracious way of saying that stuff because we can have those opinions. We can have them the right way. We can disagree with something somebody's doing in the public eye without, condemning them or being so horrible or hoping bad things happen to them personally, right? And I'm not saying any of you guys do think that, but sometimes I do think people can get angry and even righteous anger sometimes and protecting the kids and on behalf of the kids. So let's just focus on doing it the right way and focusing our energies in the right spot and how we discuss this stuff and break this stuff down. Because I obviously think there are major problems with this complaint, while I also believe that he does have a cause of action against Jodi Hildebrandt. And I'd be interested to see how collectible she is and what is collectible and is not collectible at this point. But you guys flooded my DMs and email with this lawsuit and want to know what it's about, how it would affect the kids, how it affects Ruby, things like that. I mean, theoretically, Ruby Franke could have a similar cause of action against Jodi Hildebrandt and say it's all the brainwashing stuff and the guilt because she even forced her to do it. So we'll see if something like that comes out in the future. But for now, that's all we've got on this complaint. Until next time, I'm out of here, but I'm not yet. Hit that like button. I forgot to say it. It's the weekend. Hit that like button, please, if you guys have watched this video, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.